what's up? Welcome to another episode of Wassup Conversations, a podcast with icons and legends of the video game industry. I'm your host, Hamid Reza Nikufar, and in this episode, I have a creative and multi-talented guest who's also the writer and director of Wolfenstein: The New Order, Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, and The Darkness. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jens Matthies from Sweden. In this episode, Jens and I talk about his career, life, games, Starbreeze Studio, transition to machine games, and his reason to leave the game industry. To learn more about Wassup Conversations, please visit nikufarmusic.com and keep up with the podcast from my Twitter handle at hrnikufar. If you're enjoying the content of Wassup Conversations, please make sure to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Let's go. Hello and welcome to Wassup Conversations, Jens. How are you, sir?
Good.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I am. It's summer in Sweden, so I'm working in the yard, and that's always wonderful.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast, especially on this day, the day before Midsommar. I got to know Midsommar by Ari Aster's film, and that's a weird way to be introduced to this beautiful cultural tradition. So, for me and the people who might not know about this, please tell us what is Midsommar and what do you personally do at this time and day?
Well, Midsommar is the summer solstice, which occurs tomorrow, and it is basically the time of year where we have the most sun hours. So if you go very far north or very far south, I assume, on planet Earth, then winters will be very dark and summer will be very bright. So when it's the summer solstice, we basically have no darkness, like it's bright through the night. And this is celebrated traditionally by building a big phallic symbol called it's like a it's in Swedish it's called Midsommarstång. I guess the midsummer rod or something like that. And then traditionally people dance around it, and there is lots of alcohol consumption and so forth.
So nothing similar to the movie Midsommar.
I haven't actually seen it. I have a hard time watching horror movies.
Really? Come
I think
on.
they are. Yes. I'm not a horror movie watcher. They freak me out too much. So
really?
I
That's
tend
insane.
to not see them.
Man.
But I've heard good things about this movie.
All right. So let's before we start talking about your life and career, I just want to let you know that I'm a huge fan of your work. Since Riddick and Wolfenstein's to Darkness. Darkness is one of my favorite video games of all time, but we'll get to them. But right for now, let's talk about you. Tell me about your childhood. Where did you grow up?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. How was your journey to get into the video game industry? And was it something that you always wanted to do?
Yes, it was something I always wanted to do. I wanted to be four things when I was a kid. I wanted to be an astronaut, a commercial diver, a movie director, or a video game developer. Those were my four options. And I ended up making video games. I grew up in very rural area in the west of Sweden. The area is called Värmland. But you can think of it as kind of like the hillbilly area of Sweden. The most rednecks live in Värmland. And so there's a lot of forest. It's near the border with Norway. We have a huge lake in Värmland called Vänern. And I was born in 1976. So I grew up there in kind of the 80s. And at that point, there wasn't really that much going on I mean, the big thing that happened, I suppose, was the Commodore 64, if that means anything to you.
Yeah.
But that was like the first thing you could play games on, and you would have this tape recorder with cassettes with the games on them, and oftentimes those tapes got scratched, and so it was a miracle if the game got loaded at all, but then you could play something there. And then of course the 8-bit Nintendo came out, and that was a huge thing with like Super Mario Brothers and Zelda, and there was one game I really liked. Obviously I was a huge Metroid fan back then, and another game called Section Z, which was really cool. Anyway, at some point my father got like a PC, and this was a monochrome PC with those huge, like 5.25-inch floppies or whatever. Yeah. I'm not sure it's 5.25, but whatever. It's these huge floppy disks. And on that PC was something called, I guess it was the precursor to MS Paint, or maybe it was MS Paint, I don't know. I can't remember. But basically I started making computer graphics in that software with, you only had two colors, or I guess one color, because white was the background, and all you could do was put black pixels on there. But that's how it started. And then I got one of my father's friends had some kind of software company, and he gave me a job cleaning up some images. And for that, he paid me enough to buy my very first computer, which was an Atari STE. So I got into that Atari scene, and I kept making graphics, and I joined a demo group. I don't know if this is too old for you to know what any of this is. Should I explain it?
I don't know what's demo group.
Okay. But back in the day, there were, I guess, computer enthusiasts, and they would create something called demos. So they would form groups, and they would showcase their programming and artistic and music skills by putting together a demo, which was some kind of audiovisual thing.
Yeah. I figured. I had an interview with someone else, and he mentioned about this. He was a composer in Poland, and he said he would go to demo groups in Sweden, actually. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So this is so long ago. It nowadays you might have like a LAN party or some sort of convention, but this predates LAN. Okay, so there was no such thing as a network. So what would happen usually is that somebody would rent a school or something like that over a weekend. And then all of the computer people would travel there, and we'd each carry our computer and our monitor, which in most cases was a TV. So it's very heavy stuff, and you had to carry this, and then you find some place to sit and connect things up. And because there was no network, I guess the most you could network was something called a null modem, which basically you connected one computer to another, and that allowed for some multiplayer situations. But other than that, what everybody did was copy each other's games and software on floppy disks. So they were known as copy parties. That's what the whole thing was about. Basically, a big pirate convention. And what would often happen then, in addition to this, there would be some competition. So it could be like the graphics competition, the music competition, and the demo competition, right? And these came in all kinds of flavors. And these various demo groups would put something together, and they would showcase that, and then people got to vote on what their favorite thing was. And sometimes all of the demos got compiled into a big demo disc that then got copied and sent by mail, like regular mail. you sent the discs around to different people, and that's how things spread. Anyway, I joined this demo group, and the whole thing is about there's a lot of competition between the various demo groups, and so you're always trying to outdo each other, try to do something cooler than the other people did. And there was a lot of trends in this, like how you could really push the hardware to do some incredible stuff. But there was great groups in France and in the UK and Sweden and so forth. Anyway, so that's how I kind of got started in the industry, I suppose, even though that wasn't at all making games. It allowed me to keep making graphics and get better at making graphics and compete and meet people. That's what I did. And then in parallel, at some point, the original Wolfenstein 3D arrived on PC. And that caused some commotion, but people were still, most enthusiasts were, at least in Europe, it was different in the US, I'm sure, but in Europe, most enthusiasts was still either on Amiga, which was the big platform, or Atari, which I was on. And we, that's where computer games were happening on those platforms basically. But then id Software shipped Doom, and that's when everything changed, when the PC kind of rose and became the ultimate gaming platform. So at some point there, everybody migrated over to PC. And so I played a lot of Doom. I got into some of making Doom maps, but then once Quake came around, which had really a great community around it and great kind of third-party tools like Worldcraft and those kinds of things, that's when I could really kind of put together a portfolio, and I applied for a job at this. I was working at a newspaper, and I applied for a job at this company called Starbase, which had just started, and they were like 5 people or something like that. And the main guy there was a man called Magnus Högdahl. And I sent an email to him, and I said, I would love to join. Here is some stuff that I made. And he was like, nah, I don't think so. We want to do more photo-based stuff, because depending on the kind of subculture you were in at the time, it was either seen as a good thing to do original paintings. Like, let's say you're making a level and you're doing the textures on the walls. Some people wanted it to be like very artistic and like everything painted, nothing based on photographs. So that's what I was doing, and that's what I sent to him. But then he was like, no, we're more into photographs. And that worked out really well for me, because I was working at this newspaper in the photography department. So I had access to a bunch of, for the time, very high quality camera equipment and ability to kind of scan that into the computer. So I got really good at making textures based on photographs. And so I resubmitted some of that and some levels and stuff. And then he was very interested. And so he gave me that job there. And that's how I got officially into games development.
So when was it?
Was in 1998. Yeah.
I was 7 years old back then.
Okay.
Wow. So you got into Starbreeze as an artist, right?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, totally. So I was basically an environment artist, you could say. I was building levels and doing the textures for the levels.
Yeah. So when you entered this studio, did you know that this is going to be your future, that this is going to be where you shine as a writer, as a director in the future? Or was it something like, this could be temporary, or I could end up being an artist forever?
Well, hard to say. Like I didn't have any at that point in time. I didn't have any ambition to be anything other than an artist. I mean, I am an artist. I am a creative person. That's what I've always been. But I guess visual art was my primary focus back then, right? And I didn't see myself doing anything other than visual art. But I suppose what happened was that in order to do cool stuff, I mean, everybody has different ideas about what cool stuff is, right? So you have a team. Original Starbreeze team was like 7 people, right? So whatever conflicts we had, we could have them as a group and we could try and solve them together. We were exceptionally poor at solving these problems together at that point in time. Like we would literally have, because we had no hierarchy really, except Magnus was the ultimate boss. But we all were very strong-willed, and we were very poor at conflict resolution or to negotiate and compromise. None of that. So we all were extremely passionate about what we wanted to do, but we all didn't want to do the same thing. So we would end up in meetings where we could sit literally for a whole day, for like an 8-hour meeting, and just argue back and forth and not make any progress. And so in a way that was great because you learn that that's not good.
You learn the communication,
you need a different approach,
teamwork.
Yeah, I mean, you at least learn. You might not learn to communicate, but you know that what you're doing isn't working.
Yeah.
So you need a different approach, right? So it's a baby step in the right direction in some way. But anyway, so we were. Very, very, very strong-willed people, basically. But what I realized was that a lot of the art was kind of dictated by the world design and the story, because obviously the art needs to support what the story is doing and what the world is, right? So over time, as the team grew, I became an art director. But it's still kind of, I felt like I needed to take a greater responsibility for the bigger picture in order to control the visuals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you're interested like me, I like doing things that are, I always want to create a world that, you know, doesn't exist. Like, so I was never really into doing a contemporary game because, you know, that's the world that exists. It's, you know, it's a lot of fun to play contemporary settings. Often, you know, like a Grand Theft Auto or whatever. But it's not, for me personally, I don't think it's such a creative challenge to build a world like that, because you're basically trying to replicate the real world in some way or in some shape or form. And I either like a lot of fantasy or a lot of sci-fi or something like that. But in order to kind of push in that direction, then that means that you have to push for a story that's not in a contemporary setting, or you know, a universe that's not in a contemporary setting. So over time, I kind of branched out into more of this you know, just more overarching role.
Yeah. So in your career.
And also, of course, as technology advanced, at some point, you know, we were starting making graphics. You know, like making, in the early days, you made a texture which was just an image, right? So, and I'm still very competent with Photoshop. Like, I can do a lot of things in Photoshop. It's very second nature to me. But once we started doing normal maps for Riddick and every subsequent game after that, then there's an element of modeling in there. And you need to get really good at something like Maya or something to do that. There are different tools nowadays because that space has matured a lot with tool sets. But back then, like, you had to build everything in 3D basically. And I was okay with doing that, but I was never exceptional. So it kind of was a good fit for me also to do kind of less that type of content, because the new people coming up were so much more proficient than I was. So yeah.
Yeah. So in your career, two studios play an important role, and if you look at them carefully, it's just one studio. Starbreeze, up until you guys were there, was one of my favorite studios, and then its culture and core idea went to establish Machine Games. Tell me about this transitional period between the two studios. What happened, and what was the initial idea of Machine Games?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what Starbreeze was. I mean, Starbreeze, when Starbreeze started, we didn't know what we were doing. You know, we knew we had good skills, many of us, in various domains, but we didn't know how to work together as a team. You know, we didn't know how to manage a schedule. We didn't know how to ship a game. Like, we have never done any of those things, right? And there was no wider culture where, because this was still so early in, you know, the history of game development. Most games were made with very small number of people, and most games that were started never shipped. And so the industry was young, and there wasn't really good best practices. There wasn't strong culture of how to make a game, right? So we started making this game called Sorcery, which was to be like the most ambitious role-playing game in the history of the universe. But we, of course, had no idea how to make it or what it would mean to make a game like that. Like, what kind of commitment is it really, right? We had no experience. So we worked for that for something like a year and a half or something. I don't remember, but something on that order. And then it got canceled by the publisher. Our publisher was acquired by a bigger publisher, and in that acquisition, the new publisher kind of went through the whole portfolio of games in development and culled anything that didn't look promising, and they canceled our game.
They canceled the most
for us
inspiring RPG ever. The next Elder Scrolls.
Right, and we couldn't believe it, like, because we could show these things. We could show amazing artwork, we could show amazing programming, we could show things that no one had ever done before. So we couldn't believe how they could cancel our game. But now in retrospect, it makes perfect sense, because we didn't have any gameplay, we didn't have a schedule, like everything that is needed in order to actually ship a game was missing, but we didn't understand that at the time, right? So anyway, that was a very bitter pill to swallow. We had also so basically we were running out of money, right? We didn't know what to do. But there was this company in a different part of Sweden called O3 Games, and they had just shipped their game, and they had IPO'd on a small stock exchange. So they had some cash, and they were looking for exactly what we could do, like good art and tech and those kinds of things. And we were very impressed with them, that they had actually managed to ship a game. Like, so we felt like, okay, with their kind of structure and order and our kind of creative capabilities, working together would be very successful. So they basically purchased Starbreeze. O3 Games did, and we all of Starbreeze, we moved down to Uppsala, which is a town slightly north of Stockholm, and we started building a game called Enclave together. And that was a very useful experience to have these two cultures kind of meet, because it was kind of the same thing, where we had a very strong friendship bond at Starbreeze, and they had a very strong friendship bond at O3 Games, and many of them had known each other since childhood as well. So we were kind of these two teams that were now forced to work together. And over time, we became really great friends with them, and vice versa. And we had that experience of integrating the two teams. I mean, it was competitive at first, right? Because you're trying to outdo the other people and show that you're the best. But then you can really see their strengths, and you get to know them as people and really like them as people, and work together in the trenches. And that was a very fun and rewarding experience. So we shipped this game called Enclave in 2002, I believe. And that was a insane crunch. Like, you wouldn't believe how insane that crunch was. It was something like when we had, I think we had 2 weeks before we had to ship the game, and we had 3 levels that had no gameplay on them.
Wow.
It was totally insane. So that was, but at that point we were all still very young, so working hard was not a problem, and we were able to deliver that game, and we had this amazing sense of accomplishment that we were actually able to ship a game, because that was unknown up until, like, working for 3 or 4 years and having never shipped anything, and then suddenly it's out the door and it's done. And then afterwards we realized, the game itself is kind of shit. That was a big.
Was Enclave based on the ideas that you had for the previous game, right?
In some sense, I would say, but not very. I mean, for Sorcery, the first game we were working on was like a full RPG. Like, that was something like Skyrim was the vision, but obviously we made like 1/3% of that actually, but we didn't realize that at the time. Like, we had no concept of how much work that would take. But Enclave is more of a linear challenges, basically, because at least the first version of it, there wasn't really any save points within the level, so you had to like memorize how the level worked, and it was extremely hard game. And we did. Like, we had one QA guy, and he was a lovely guy, and he was great at playing the game. And of course, the more he played it, the better he got at it. So we would ask him, like, how's the difficulty level? And he was like, well, it could probably be a bit more of a challenge. So over time, it got dialed up to extreme levels, and then normal people start playing the game. They just get destroyed in various horrible ways. And it's not. It didn't get the reception that we were hoping for, right? But again, that was incredibly important for our kind of learning process. Like, we actually have to think about these things. Like, we can't just look at it as, all of these components that we're doing that looks great, sounds great, whatever. It has to come together as a cohesive whole, right? So that was a huge learning experience, and we applied all of that learning when we started making Riddick. And that's kind of where, for the first time, everything kind of came together. We were able to do something very sophisticated, technically, artistically, gameplay-wise. We're able to break some new ground and put something together that was definitely our best work up until that point, and was very well received as well. And we also got to kind of deal with difficult kind of publisher relationship stuff, because that's a movie franchise. There are all kinds of external requirements that you have to comply with. So yeah, that was a good thing.
And by the way, you guys made the best game made based on a movie, and it was. Now, come to think of it, everything that you've touched, everything that you've made throughout your career, I think is better than the original IP. Like Riddick is surely, I mean, people will agree, is better than the movie. It's way better. It's one of the best games ever. And then Darkness, I read the comics. Darkness is better than the comics. And Wolfensteins are better than the previous Wolfensteins. So, damn.
Okay. I'm glad you think so. I mean, it has been a lot of learning things and really trying to because that's always the goal, right? You want to take the best out of the source material and you want to turn it into something greater. So after we shipped Riddick, we were, and this was the thing with Starbreeze 2, and it was always the problem at Starbreeze, was that as an independent developer, you're constantly under pressure to line up a new project once your project finishes. And there's a huge temptation to kind of stagger the projects because of this. So basically start a new project before you finish the current project. And that's very dangerous because the plan you have for your current project is just a guesstimate. Like, you don't know how things it's all unexplored territory. It's incredibly hard to predict how things are going to go. And as soon as you start struggling, then the temptation is to pull resources from the other project to finish the first one. And that, of course, leaves a deficit in the other project. So, it's very painful rigmarole to try and wrangle a company like that over time. And so we finished Riddick, and we did not have a lot of options. And the opportunity because that was in the middle of a console transition as well. Like, we were going from the original Xbox to the 360, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% if that's the case, but I think it was one console transition or another. And of course, because we're technically driven, we want to be on the next gen consoles as a company. And so we decided to, and there weren't that many next gen opportunities at the time, but there was this project based on the comic book, The Darkness. And the downside of that was that it was kind of in a contemporary setting, but it did have a lot of fantastical elements to it. So we really appreciated that. So we basically plowed the comics. We figured out what we really liked about it, and then we kind of emphasized those things, and we kind of culled away the things that we didn't like. And that turned into The Darkness, which we released in 2007, I believe.
Yep.
Riddick was 2004.
Yeah. So what happened that you guys went to start Machine Games?
Yeah, so after The Darkness, we ended up it was a lot of business politics. We ended up in a pretty toxic relationship with a new publisher after we shipped The Darkness. Not really anyone's fault, I would say. Some of that was, or it was also everyone's fault. Like, some of that was definitely our fault. The problem is that most of us are so incredibly committed to the game that we're making that you get so into it and you get so protective of it that anything that kind of messes up your thought process or your plan or whatever, I think this is common for most game developers, that becomes a threat. And then you have a publisher that isn't really skilled at giving clear direction. I mean, we have always been pretty great at working within set boundaries and maximizing what we can get out of that. But if those boundaries keep shifting all the time, then you can never really make any meaningful progress. So we ended up in this kind of, it was almost like a Groundhog Day type loop where the game was getting constantly reset every couple of months. We came up with something that we really loved. We pitched it. They also loved it. We started making it. And then a new direction came down. It was like, no, we want to do something else. So let's reset the whole thing and start over. And so we were in that cycle. And we basically got to a point where we realized that whatever we ship now, it's not going to be something that's as good as we can make it. It's going to be so compromised that it might still be okay, but it's not going to be what we want to ship. So a few of us decided at that point to basically quit and start this new company, which became Machine Games. And that was a both wonderful and harrowing experience because, it was wonderful in the sense that we could really apply everything we've learned over the years. And we went about this very methodical, where we listed what are the do's and don'ts of game development really? Like, what are all of the mistakes that we've made, and how do we make sure not to repeat those mistakes? And we came up with a blueprint of how the company would operate in order to avoid the worst problems and try to maximize the most success. So we had this blank slate that we could create something from the ground up, having now, more than 10 years professional experience. But the harrowing part of it was that we had no money. Once we quit, we had no more salaries. And so we sold this on an individual level in many different ways. Some of us, like me, for example, I had to take out a mortgage, and I have to live off of that mortgage and hope that we would sign a deal with a publisher before I had to be homeless, And the whole process was a lot more time consuming than any of us had imagined. So it took about a year and a half before we finally had an agreement with Bethesda to join them.
So you had no game, and you just went to Bethesda to sell the studio?
Well, that's true. It depends on what you mean by a game. I mean, we had game concepts. So that was a huge part that's what we spent our time on, basically, before we had a deal. So we would develop various game concepts, and we would customize them for various publishers. And we would go to those publishers and say, here's who we are. This is what we can do. Here's an idea. We're happy to listen to your ideas, blah, blah, blah. And when we started talking to Bethesda, we basically asked them if anyone was working on Wolfenstein, because they had acquired id Software the year before.
Yeah.
Or 2 years before, whatever, sometime before. So we knew they had access to the id Software IP. And we were, of course, supremely interested in that because we love id Software and all of their games. Stand by, I have to cough. Sorry. I don't know if you're editing this.
No,
you can edit this out.
I wanted it raw. Natural.
Okay.
And by the way, that's who came up with the name of the studio, Machine Games?
Well, whenever you're trying to come up with a name, you run into this problem that all names and all domains, internet domains, are taken. This is something actually that William Gibson predicted like 20 years ago. I think it was in Mona Lisa Overdrive. I'm not 100% though, but there's a guy whose job is basically to come up with names. So he has some random name generator that is clicking 10,000 times in order to find a new name that isn't taken. But it was a very long process of us arguing about the name. I wanted something that was, implied a theme of some kind, but couldn't really come up with anything good there. we had another name first, but it didn't pan out. I don't remember why, if it was, some other company was already called that or whatever. But then one day Magnus just showed up and he had registered the domain Machine Games. And we thought, well, that sounds kind of cool. Let's do that. And then we kind of build the brand identity around machines, I suppose.
Yeah. So you were talking about talking to id and acquiring Wolfenstein.
Yeah. So, I mean, we had a track record, but it wasn't Starbreeze asking them, right? It was this new entity with a few people in it. And although we were the leadership people of Starbreeze in many ways, definitely creatively and technically, we didn't have a team because we didn't have money to hire a team. Like, it's a catch-22 there, right? So we had to convince them that not only were we competent enough to do it, but we could also get the people needed to do it. So we talked to them, and we basically we went to id Software to get to know them, get to learn the engine, but also to prove ourselves to them, because they ultimately had to sign off on us doing a Wolfenstein game. So we spent a couple of weeks at id Software when they were based in Mesquite, Texas, and we basically learned the tools. We built a level, put gameplay in, designed a story. We utilized all of our skills as individuals. The programmers started fixing bugs that they had a hard time fixing. It was really crazy because, for most of us, for me, for example, coming up with a story, all it takes is like a Word document, and I can, fudge some pictures and some images in Photoshop and make a nice presentation. That's not so complicated. But for the gameplay people, they have to literally learn brand new tools and build a level and make it happen. Make it playable and make it fun. But the programmers, they have the worst time of it because they've never seen the code base before, and so they have no idea. They don't have a frame of reference for how a bug might appear in this code. So they get it. So basically, what it did was say, okay, here are some bugs that we have a very hard time solving. We haven't found the cause of them. Can you take a look at them and see what you can do? And I remember Jim, our Machine Games, what is it? CTO? Yeah, CTO. He came up to me and he whispered like, dude, I've never seen this code base. I have no fucking idea what this bug is. Like, it's a total mystery. And I said, okay, well, just try your best. Everything hinges on this. And so he went away, and then he came back 2 hours later and he said, okay, I found the bug. It was the same bug we had at Starbreeze back in the day.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah. So it's great to have people around you that are extremely competent. That is reassuring for everybody when somebody can take on a challenge like that and succeed efficiently. That's cool. So anyway, over those weeks, we kind of gained their trust, I suppose, or enough trust from id Software for them to basically gamble on us and say, yeah, we think these guys can do it. And yeah, we've signed off a story concept, and they can, we will allow them to try to make this Wolfenstein game. And that was kind of the basis for Bethesda also trusting us. And from
so
that,
beautiful.
the deal was made. Yeah, it was a dream come true, really, because we idolized the id guys as well. They were the reason many of us got into games, was because of Quake and the tools that, or the opportunity to modify Quake and make your own kind of portfolio and fun stuff based on Quake. So
that's crazy because
really
cool. The IP is so well known and so beloved, and to give it out to a studio that has, how many people were you? Like 12?
No, we were, I think we were seven
Wow.
people, seven founders of Machine Games, and two kind of dropped off during this time, during that year and a half. So it was really starting over from scratch, basically.
Wow.
But like I said, we could start over with so much more experience and knowledge. So we were able to kind of bootstrap a team fairly rapidly. And
then you had to kind of like gather this team, make the studio actually by hiring people.
Yeah.
Where were you, in Uppsala?
Yeah, in Uppsala, Sweden,
wow.
Which is both a blessing and a curse, because Uppsala is not a big, I mean, Sweden doesn't have many big towns to start with. Stockholm is, I think, somewhere between 1 and 2 million at the moment. And that's like by far the biggest city in Sweden, right? Uppsala is like 200,000 people, so it's a fairly small town by international standards. And so many people don't want to live in a small town like that. But the people who do come there, they oftentimes get very rooted, and they stick around for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's really, really helpful when you're making games, is that you have people that you know well, you know their capabilities well, you get along with them well. That really helps to create this kind of family atmosphere within the studio.
Yeah. So after releasing 2 mind-blowing Wolfenstein games, actually I started playing from New Order again. This week I started playing New Order. It was like about an hour ago I was playing the game, and I was like, this game still holds up. This is good, actually. And
okay, I'm glad you think so.
Yeah. So making these amazing games, why did you decide to leave the studio after releasing 2 successful games under your direction?
I kind of felt like I needed a little break. I mean, I've been doing it now for, what is it, 24 years-ish. And I felt like I needed some time to clear my head and pursue some other things. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's totally understandable. After releasing huge
really
games.
Major. It's a very intense industry, and especially if you have a lot of responsibility, you spend a lot of time kind of worrying and putting out fires and trying to head off problems before they occur, and then always disaster strike, several times a week, and you have to maneuver that somehow, and it consumes your life, right? And I don't really mind that, because I'm that kind of person who like to fully commit to stuff.
Yeah.
But I also felt like I needed to do some other things. Like I have some screenplays I want to write, and
well, I was about to ask about that. Like, you have this amazing skill set. I literally today I was like, this guy knows how to write and direct an amazing film. I wonder if he's interested. Are you interested in making movies? Please do.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And I mean, it's not entirely fair, because we over the years we have worked with a lot of extremely good people. Like, it's definitely not just me doing stuff, right? There are a lot of people that I rely on in order to get to where we are going with the things that we have done in these games. I think it would be a big... I think it was some Pixar guy who said something that stuck with me. He said, making movies is capturing lightning in a bottle, but making a 3D rendered movie like they're doing is also catching lightning in a bottle, but it's 1 volt at a time. It's a very kind of accumulative process, or cumulative, I suppose it's called. Anyway, and that's kind of games too. Like you have a lot of time to think about what you're doing, to iterate, to rethink things, try something, make a mistake, fix it, and then you build this kind of pyramid of quality over time. Whereas in a movie, you only have so many hours of daylight. You have to get your shots done that day. You're dealing with different requirements. But yes, I would love to make a movie someday. That would be super cool. I think I know enough to do a good job of it, but there is a lot of things I would have to relearn and because many things are a totally different approach than when you're compared to working with performance capture and having that very long iterative process.
Yeah, true. So I'm generally not into story-driven games, since a good majority of them are poorly written, with lots of purposeless dialogues, mostly lore-focused, right, with boring characters. I get my story dose from movies. But if the story works, man, this medium is perfect to connect with characters. So, again, this week I started to play Wolfenstein again, and I'm fascinated about the fact that you guys mixed this emotionless shooter franchise into something very personal and relatable. I'm at the beginning of a New Order, and I'm so impressed by the fact that Anya becomes the drive and the purpose of this gun-blazing man. And there was this scene where Blazkowicz brings the beaten-up Nazi to a Polish family, and in a long shot we see an old woman crying and hitting the Nazi. That was a very powerful moment, and and in a very short period, the characters, the mood, and the goal, and the atmosphere of the games are introduced, and it's so relatable. So before this, Wolfenstein was like this cool shoot the Nazis in the fantasy scenario. But when you guys took over, the mix was like, how is this possible? So same goes for The Darkness. I've read the comics, but the game touches so deeply. And there's this scene that I told Mikhail Saker, one of the writers of that game.
I know him. Yeah, he's a good friend of mine.
Yeah. So in this scene, Jackie, a guy, shoots at mafia members with double guns and slaughter people with his demonic powers. He's sitting in his girlfriend's apartment, Jenny, watching To Kill a Mockingbird, and a dialogue option appears that says, "Tell her that you love her." And when you hit that, Jackie says, "Jenny," and she answers yes, and Jackie says nothing. And at this moment, it's so emotional. Like, I know the words, but they can't convey the emotion I have right now. Like, I know how dark and messed up my life is. What if by saying that I involve her more into my life, where I could die and she loses me, or worse, get her killed at any moment? And spoiler alert, shit goes down. So these are a list of details about the games you've worked on. And tell me about creating this emotional atmosphere and characters in these crazy, ugly, and sometimes unmatchable worlds.
Yeah, The Darkness is, as the name suggests, also a very dark game. And I wouldn't say, obviously we have learned, we've improved since then in many ways. And I also think the quality step between the New Order and New Colossus is pretty substantial too. I feel very, like when I play the New Order, I see where I messed up a lot more than when I play the New Colossus. I feel very good about where that ended up as a result. But it's hard to say too, because we really are. It really is a huge team effort, and there's a lot of responsibility that ultimately falls to me. But in no way do I come up with everything or anything like that. We are creative. We're a group of creative people, and we all have, everybody contributes some really crucial things that would never kind of the whole would never be as good if it was just me or just somebody else doing it. Like it's collaboration, and a really kind of productive collaboration. That's what it's about from many different domains, from the writing, from the performances, the animation people, the sound design, the graphics, all of that kind of comes together to end up awesome, hopefully, right? So there's a lot of kind of puzzle pieces that needs to work in order for the whole to work. But having said that, the way I approach it personally is to always kind of structure everything as a problem that needs to be solved. And you can create your own problems just to kind of guide the process. So one problem that is kind of, it's in a way totally artificial, and kind of vague, but it's really helpful to me, is that I don't want a scene or a character in the game that I don't personally am extremely enthusiastic about realizing. So the dream is you walk on set in the morning and you get here's the list of the takes that we're doing today. And you look at the list and you say, oh, yes, finally, that scene. I've been longing to do that one. And then you look at the next one. It's like, yeah, fuck yeah, this is the one I've been wanting to do forever. And then the next one is, yeah, you want to have that sense so that none of the scenes are like, oh, okay, we got to get through this one. And then hopefully the next one will be more fun, And I use that as kind of a litmus test going through everything. Like, so if I'm not very enthusiastic about a scene, then that's an indication that it's not the right scene. It needs to be something else. And the scene might be there for many different reasons. Like you might need to convey a certain type of exposition to the player, or you need to introduce a new character, or you need to introduce a new setting or a mission. It could be all of these things, right? And so you have these components that needs to fit into the scene. And you need to write the scene to convey all of those, or to check all of those boxes, right? And at the end of that, you might end up with something that doesn't really make you enthusiastic, just feels like an exercise. And that means it's wrong. So the challenge there, from my point of view, is to make sure that all of the scenes that we're doing, you walk in there and you feel enthusiastic about it, and you cannot wait to see what the actors are going to do with it. Like that's the goal. And if all your scenes in the whole piece is like that, then you're probably in good shape.
Yeah, and it's interesting that many games with these long cutscenes and long like speeches, so boring. But for example, let's talk about a new Colossus. I don't remember it exactly, but there's this part of the game that I'm like in this air ventilation system, very dark and very, very mechanical and dead place, and we're walking down there into the darkness, and the main character is talking about Anya, his wife, and the contrast here is like it's more impactful than any kind of cutscene that you could have had. I am walking with a fucking controller. I play the Wolfenstein with consoles. I'm sorry.
Same here. I prefer the controller.
Yeah. With a controller in my hand, I'm walking. I'm hearing this claustrophobia is around. And meanwhile, this guy is talking about his wife being with her, and there is hope in this. So without a doubt, you connect with this guy. Like, yeah, man, I want to get out of this fucked up place too, and hopefully see you reconnect with your love. So yeah, that's how it works. That's the magic, and I see that in all of your games, and that is why narration, the story, is so important for me in your games. Other games, I just hit the fucking skip button and just get along with it, and you wouldn't lose anything. So that's very but it's a big experiment too, and a lot of it hinges on
because you don't know, is it going to turn out too pretentious? Is it going to feel like, just overbearing, hearing this voice all the time? And throughout development, you certainly get opinions like that too. And then there's a big timing thing. Like you may have a really cool thing planned, but the gameplay section doesn't allow for that speech to, you run through the area before he's finished talking or whatever. So there's the conceptual side of it, but there's by far the most important part is the execution side of it. And there, of course, it helps a lot to have such an amazing actor like Brian Bloom, who can really carry this part, because it is a tricky one. Like, because he has to be, BJ Blazkowicz has to be the meathead that we know from the original Wolfenstein, but he also needs a soul on top of that, and it needs to be the way, like from a writing point of view, the way we approached him was to have because it's inner monologue, right?
Yes.
It's not like he's talking out loud. You hear his thoughts. That's what's going on, right? And that means that they can be extremely intimate, these thoughts, because when you are thinking in your own head, you don't censor yourself for the benefit of the people around you, because nobody can hear you, right? It's just your thoughts. And so that's what we tried to do there with his inner monologues, was to make him super like not at all afraid to express his feelings or whatever, because it's just to himself. Like no one else is listening, right? Except the player is listening, but he doesn't know that, right?
Exactly.
So you're kind of along on this internal ride.
And I wanted to talk about this. That's something that I love in all of your games. And you had great actors to kind of like voice these characters. From Vin Diesel when he speaks to himself. All the characters you write are talking very slow and very intimate, and it's very different. I mean, in a lot of games, to just give a hint to the player that what to do and what am I thinking here, because we're playing and you can't see my face and such.
The characters it was great to do that with BJ Blazkowicz as well, because Brian Bloom, he loves this stuff, and he, we would turn down the lights in the studio so it was kind of dark. And he would be there in the voice booth, and because it's thoughts, not voice, you want to remove all breath and all of those things that are like, the physicality of it. You want out of there, and you just want like clean, very precise, quiet thoughts, articulated with words. And he just did a phenomenal job at that stuff.
I was just playing the game, and I remember said, Anya, where are you? Mother of all headaches. Like, oh yeah, that mother of all headaches. I can understand. Like, he wants to find this girl, and he has a badass headache. These are very, very intimate. And in Darkness, you had like two characters. One was Kirk Acevedo.
Darkness itself.
Yeah.
Kirk Acevedo and Mike Patton.
Yeah. That was great.
Yeah. That's the thing too. Like, a lot of it hinges on your casting. Casting is a real art form. Like, what I like is always to have characters that are very kind of distinct from each other, and that's everything from kind of their names. You don't want multiple characters that have similar names. So we try to have have the names as different as possible, nothing starting with the same letter, and that really separate them in terms of what their names are. But then, of course, more importantly, in their kind of personality, in their expression, in their agenda within the world, you want them all to occupy a unique slot in the puzzle. But then, so you can do that from a writing point of view, but then you need to find those actors who can actually do that, who can like take that essence of that character and just uh, express it in an amazingly cool and interesting and credible and awesome way. So we spend a lot of time with the casting and trying to find exactly the right people. And I'm always on the lookout for people who has a kind of a unique expression, a unique voice. So whenever I'm watching a TV show or a movie or whatever, if there's someone that really kind of stands out in those respects, I will note that and I will try to keep track of those people. And then who knows, later down the road, there might be some character. And it's like, I look at the list that I have and like, oh yeah, that person would be awesome.
So did you cast Brian Bloom from Once Upon a Time in America? like this kid had his future.
When he was like 10 years old or whatever. No, actually, BJ was very tricky to cast. And we had hundreds of people read for him. And I just had this huge list of samples to listen to.
But I'm glad you guys worked with each other.
Yeah. I love Brian. He's so fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And he's a game developer now, by the way. I don't know.
Wow, I didn't know that. Oh, he writes. So, he's a writer. He wrote one of these Call of Duties, right?
Yeah, multiple ones.
Wow. Yeah.
And he also performs the lead in one of them. He's very, very good. He's awesome. But anyway, so, and that's the thing too, like every actor you see in one of our games, they are kind of the winner in a Darwinistic war with hundreds of other people, you know? And it's not like those 100 other people are shit. No, they are also awesome. So it's like the awesomest of the awesome. That's who actually ends up in the game. And so that was the thing there with... But it's such a gratifying experience when you're listening to all of these people who are auditioning, and you hear one of them. It's like, yeah, that's good. You hear the next one. Oh, that's also good. You hear the next one. Yeah, good. And you're going through the whole thing, and then you get to number 122, and then it's like you sit up straight and like, fuck, this is perfect. This is the one, you know. And whenever that happens, that's just an amazing feeling, because it's so binary, because before you cross that threshold, you're like, yeah, I don't know, maybe we'll never find someone. And then suddenly the perfect person appears, and then it's like, yes, problem solved.
Yeah,
you know?
I know exactly. I'm working on this game, and at the beginning, they said, oh, you have no restriction budget. You can hire anyone you like. And suddenly that makes it even fucking harder. You have so many people, and you listen to their voices, and amazing, and it always gets harder. But I guess
and then you have the kind of compounding factor of how do they fit within the ensemble. Yeah, like, does this person, even though they're great, their voice might sound pretty much identical to this other person.
Exactly.
And that means you're going to mix them up, like if you hear them on the radio or whatever. So it's like, you know, it's not just that they have to be amazing. They have to be amazing within the ensemble of all the other actors.
Yeah, true. So I know you're a movie buff, so let's talk about them. What are some of your favorite movies of all time?
Well, that's a hard question to answer. What I realized when I was fairly young was that, the first time I saw a movie and I thought, this must be the same person who made that other movie that I liked. And then I looked it up and I saw, oh shit, it is the same person. So then I realized, okay, you can follow directors, and you can have directors that are, I mean, obviously everybody knows this, but I was a young kid in hillbilly country in Sweden, so nobody told me this. So I kind of had to discover it for myself, that, you know, there are some people out there that has an amazing vision, an amazing kind of approach to the craft, who just make really good stuff. And they might fail every once in a while, but, you know, if you track their careers, you're going to end up seeing a lot of good stuff. And one of my favorite directors of all time is, of course, David Fincher,
Yes.
who has made. I've only 2 times in my life I have left a movie theater kind of shaking from the experience, and that was his movies Seven and Fight Club. So those are big favorites of mine. Have you seen those?
Of course, sir. By the way, a funny thing is that Riddick, the first movie, was pitch black. So
Right.
I don't know if you know about this. Pitch Black was pitched as Alien 3, but it got rejected. And then Fincher made Alien 3, and Pitch Black went to become this other new IP. And then the Chronicle of Riddick, the game you guys made, was so similar to Alien 3. And in my opinion, the Riddick you made was better than Alien 3. Fincher's like God, but Alien 3, I'm not in that. But I know it has some.
He had to find his footing as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bit underrated too. I mean, it's not for sure not his best work, and it's definitely not the best Alien movie. But it's not a total betrayal either.
Yeah.
Like some other movies, like you know, in the way that, let's say, Matrix 2 and 3 were total betrayals of Matrix 1.
Yes.
That is amazing. So, but anyway, Fincher, I will see anything that man does. Of course, a very formative experience for me was the original RoboCop, Paul Verhoeven's.
Yeah.
Was it 86 or something? I don't remember. But that was like seeing that when I was a kid. I was like, holy shit, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. And it still holds up today. Like I
can see the references movie. In Wolfenstein.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, all of these things are very inspiring. What else on my absolute top list? Of course, I'm a huge James Cameron geek. Aliens, of course, incredible movie.
Alien or Aliens?
I said Aliens, and I mean Aliens.
Yes.
Although I also love Alien, but I think Aliens is the superior movie.
Yes, exactly. Man, it's a badass movie. It's a different movie, and for that, it's a better movie.
I don't know. I mean, original Alien is totally amazing too, but it is more of a horror thing, whereas Aliens is just it's just amazing characters.
And it's fun.
It's so much fun, and it's scary, but also cool action. It's a wonderful, wonderful movie.
Yeah, the scene when they're wondering how they're gonna kill the aliens, like, don't shoot at him, and someone says, so how are we gonna kill them? Bad language. Yeah. So let's talk about the last movie you watched and enjoyed a lot.
Last one was Top Gun 2.
Wow, haven't seen it yet.
No, it's pretty good. I mean, I did the thing where I watched Top Gun 1 at home and then immediately went to the movie theater and saw Top Gun 2. Hard to say which one is better. It's not like I'm a huge Top Gun geek or anything, but I have fond memories of Top Gun 1. As you know, I wouldn't put it at the level of Die Hard, but it's still, a nice 80s action movie. This new one is pretty cool. The kind of aerial maneuvers, all of the flying stuff is just super cool. And it's, competent, nice movie. It's not the greatest thing I've ever seen, but it was nice.
Yeah. So
happy seeing that. So
what movie are you excited to see this year?
I am really, I was a comic book person when I was a kid, and I would read all of the Marvel stuff. I was never hugely into DC, but then I went to some kind of comic book convention or fair or whatever that's called, and I found Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns.
Wow.
And that was hugely formative on my life.
Yeah.
Like that was the greatest thing I had ever seen. Like I read that so many times. I fucking loved that thing. And that really, like, if I would say that comic book and RoboCop are the two most formative experiences of my life when it comes to my kind of creative sensibilities, those two things. But it's so anyway, so when I was reading those like the Marvel stuff when I was a kid, I always dreamed about, oh, this would make such an amazing movie. And then suddenly now, when I'm reaching middle age, suddenly it's actually happening. You know, all of these things are, they're getting, you know, high budget, very talented people doing it, right? And I although, you know, for sure there's a lot of uneven quality, but when it's really good, like Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which is, I think, is the best Marvel movie.
I agree.
Just stunningly good movie. And then the way they wrapped up Avengers Endgame, I'm in awe. Like, imagine taking those, it must be something like 40 characters, and they're just weaving a plot that is, I wouldn't say it's necessarily unpredictable, because once you see Infinity War, you can kind of tell like what has to happen for this to work out. And that is kind of what happens, but it's just crafted in such an expert fucking way. It's unbelievable to watch. And then when they say, there's this moment, I don't remember if it's Infinity War or Endgame, but, you know, yeah, I guess it must be Endgame. So it's early on in the beginning when it goes, you know, they do their thing with Thanos or whatever, the screen goes black, and then it says 5 years later. And, you know, like, okay, the world has totally changed, and they're crossing some, you know, abandoned football arena or something with a camera. I don't know what it is, but it's just like, oh, okay, so we're in deep trouble now. Like, how the fuck are they going to figure this out? And then they expertly craft amazing resolutions for all of these character arcs. There's so many people, so many characters, and it all comes together into this super cohesive whole. And then Tony Stark goes, "I am Iron Man,"
Yeah.
and it's just
Exactly.
so phenomenal. Like, I get emotional just thinking about it. Like, that is such an artistic achievement, and I know that people are like, you know, that's not high culture. Like, why are you watching Marvel movies when you could be watching, you know, some fucking Terrence Malick bullshit or something? But
What am I a Terrence Malick fan?
I hate his movies. Like, I can't stand them.
Oh my God.
Like, it's the most pretentious bullshit imaginable to me. Like, the Thin Red Line, like, I'm dying watching that thing. It's so fucking bad.
Oh, I thought he cast Kirk Acevedo from Thin Red Line. So.
Oh, no. Well, maybe that was part of it, but, you know, there are amazing actors in that movie. They're amazing performances. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying as a movie. Anyway, I don't want to. Anyway, I just. I think Endgame is stunningly competently made, and the only thing that sucks about it is that the Hulk doesn't get his
moment. Yeah.
Everyone else does, and that in itself is just stunning to me. Like, it's I have no idea how to take something that incredibly convoluted and put it together in that amazing way. Like, I'm very impressed by that. That is an achievement for real.
Ah, true. So, some of your tell me about some of your favorite games.
Well, I'm a huge fan of all of Bethesda's games, really.
Yeah.
Like I've played so much Fallout, so much Skyrim. Love those games. I love that they're first person and they allow for so much creativity. In terms of older stuff, I don't know how far back you want to go, but there was a PlayStation game, I think, called Eco that I really loved.
Yeah.
It was very cool. Of course, love the id games. I've played so much Quake, it's unbelievable. I think Arcane is doing some awesome stuff. I would play. I think there are some. I haven't played Red Dead Redemption 2. Is it the last one?
Yeah.
Latest
You
one.
haven't played it? Are you gonna love it?
I haven't played it. I mean, it looks amazing. Everything I've seen from it just looks mind-bogglingly good.
Talking about storytelling, that game delivers, man.
Yeah. I mean, it looks stunning, but it's third person, and I have a big threshold when it comes to third person games. Like, it really has to be unbelievably, insanely interesting to me for me to cross that threshold and play a third person game. It happens sometimes, like it happened with The Last of Us. I really love The Last of Us.
Yeah.
I haven't played 2 because in the promotional material, it seemed so incredibly brutal that it was a bit of a
I
turn
didn't
off.
know.
And
That comes from the guy who made Wolfenstein games.
I realized this must sound weird. But for some reason,
the main character of your game get his head cut off and then reestablished again, and you have problem with.
I know. I mean, I've definitely. I am the architect of some very brutal stuff in terms of games, and it's not like I told myself, this is too brutal for me, I'm not going to play it. I've never gotten around to playing it. And the reason for it is that I feel like I have to steel myself for this very bleak experience. You know?
I understand.
It's nice to have a sense of, okay, there's a ray of hope here somewhere, but I never got that sense from the promotional material, although I'm sure there is.
Are you excited about Starfield?
Oh, I'm so excited. I really loved what they did with the new, with that latest 15-minute kind of, oh my fucking God, I'm going to play that so much. Like I'm going to build spaceship. Like,
have you ever met Todd Howard?
Oh yeah, many times.
I have this phobia of meeting him and talking to him. I don't know. Wow. He's such a god in my mind that, like, oh man, I'm gonna embarrass myself talking to him. So one day maybe.
No, he's a good guy. He'll be.
So I heard.
Good. Yeah. No, don't worry about it. It's he is what can I say? He is a stunningly competent game developer. Like, he knows his shit. And he has the track record to prove it. So it's pretty inspiring to. It's always very inspiring to see what they're doing. Like they are willing to go places that most people just cannot go because it's too complicated to get there. Like,
true. Like
there's so many variables and so many combinations of those variables that can go wrong. That you're creating such a difficult problem to solve that. Almost no one on planet Earth is willing to attempt to solve it. But Bethesda Game Studios they are willing to take on those challenges, and that's very inspiring.
True, and I love the fact that they accepted this challenge of kind of believing in you guys to give this. Wolfenstein was the first game I ever played. I remember playing this with my brother, and my brother was playing it on PC, and I was in charge of kicking. So there was, I don't know if it was R or F. So he was like, okay, I play the game, you just kick. And I was like, get close to this motherfucker, I want to kick. So So I have so many good memories about him, and so and you brought it back perfectly. So I guess this is a great moment to end this conversation. I just want to thank you so much for your time. I grew up with your games, man. I played Riddick, Darkness so many times. I was one of the most active members of the old Starbreeze forum back when forums were a thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
your art, your passion for writing and directing emotional stories are so inspiring, and you're one of the rare people in the industry that I can confidently say that creates multi-layered artistic experiences that we are proud to see in video games. So thank you for everything, and keep on inspiring all of us.
Thank you very much. Those were some very kind words. And let's not forget the other people who are involved, like Tommy Tordson Björk, who does a lot of the writing, who is amazing, like Tom Keegan, performance director. There are a lot of people who are a part of this, and just to name a few, but like there are tons of people at Machine Games and everywhere who have done vital contributions to making this work.
Yeah, true.
Anyway, this was a lot of fun, and I'm happy to do it again sometime if you want.
Absolutely, sir. Yes, I can't wait for to see your next adventure. Hopefully, I know how awesome you make games. I'm curious how you make movies. Please go, just make a short, just make a short film, man.
I have some really strong ideas for some screenplays.
Challenge yourself. Make a horror short film.
Yeah, there might be some horror elements. It's different because it's one thing what you like to watch, and it's one other thing what you like to do, right? So, but I think I have a strong idea for a few sci-fi epics that I am currently piecing together in my brain. So I think in a few months I'll be ready to start committing things to paper, and that'll be fun.
Yes, awesome. Can't wait for that. Thank you so much, and have a great Midsommar, man. I want to come there when it's Midsommar in Sweden. And
you should. It's lovely this time of year. It's really cool.
Yeah,
sure.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
See you later. Goodbye.